4 o'clock. So, for those of you I don't know, my name is Matt Gruhn. I am Assistant Director of Oyez, the Multimedia Judicial Archive at the IIT Chicago Kent College of Law, downtown Chicago.
And I'm Allie Bernstein. I am the Communications and Development Specialist, surprisingly also at Oyez. I know. Also, it is pronounced Oyez.
Yeah, for anyone, yeah, so we can go into a long explanation of the historical origins of that word, but it is, for our purposes, pronounced Oyez.
Oh, yeah.
So we're just gonna, we have just a few 14 points to discuss about things we're doing with Oyez, features we've added, things you might not be aware of if you're familiar with the site. For anyone who isn't familiar with Oyez, broadly speaking, our sort of claim to fame is that we have a collection of digital copies of recordings of oral arguments before the US Supreme Court. So we're very focused on that court. The Oyez website contains case summaries, the audio recordings, transcripts of recordings, opinion announcements, and a lot of other cool stuff that we're going to show you today. And I can also tell you that in the last couple of weeks, we have finally completed putting everything we have online, which means that for the first time, you can actually listen to every oral argument heard before the US Supreme Court since 1955 when they started recording things. So we have approximately 10,000 hours of oral arguments for your listening pleasure. If you're really, really boring, you can listen to all of them, including the ERISA and bankruptcy cases. So I'm just going to run through a few features on Oyez you might not be aware existed.
Okay, so before we run through those exciting features, so we've got 7.2 million annual visitors. Who exactly are they? We have a lot of students. That's really helpful for student research. It's primarily high school, college, law school, that kind of crowd. And many of our current research assistants, like law students at Chicago Kent who work for Oyez, have said that they applied specifically to Chicago Kent because of Oyez and how helpful we've been, and all kinds of lovely things that inflate our already inflated egos. We also have, we have a lot of teachers who like to work with us. It's used in the classroom. They recommend it for research. We actually met a group of teachers at a conference about 2 years ago. And they provided a lot of helpful feedback, and one of those pieces of advice eventually turned into a project called Shifting Scales, which you'll hear about momentarily. So we love hearing from teachers about what's useful to them. We also get a lot of lawyers visiting our website. I've talked to a couple of advocates who are currently arguing at the Supreme Court, getting pictures from them, that kind of thing, and they've told me that they actually use Oyez and listen to the arguments to see what they're up against and how they should act and what they can expect. So that's kind of cool. Journalists, a lot of our clips are used on NPR, Washington Post, on TV and print media, that kind of thing. It's very easy to search both historical arguments and what's currently at the court. And my current favorite is just Curious Citizens, especially this account called Swift on SCOTUS, which is literally just pictures of Taylor Swift reacting to Supreme Court news. I can't imagine who puts this together, but I love them. So yes, people from all walks of life find this useful.
Okay, so. So I mentioned Oyez has a lot of audio recordings of oral arguments going all the way back to 1945. We also have the current oral arguments. So if you know anything about Supreme Court oral arguments, you know the hottest thing to do with Supreme Court oral argument recordings is to try to use them to predict the outcomes of cases before they're actually decided. So this year in April, everyone was scouring the hours of argument in Obergefell versus Hodges, trying to decide what Anthony Kennedy and Chief Justice Roberts were thinking with respect to same-sex marriage. There's a whole collection of academic papers and a lot of research around this. There's even a website called, or a service called Fantasy SCOTUS, which is kind of like fantasy baseball for the US Supreme Court, where you can collect and predict. You can listen to oral arguments and try to make your own predictions about how the justice is going to come out on a given case. And for the most part, that's done using listening to oral argument recordings. So Oyez can help with that, right? We have this whole treasure trove of oral argument recordings, and if you really start listening to some of the cases, you start to realize all the justices have their own little quirks and tics, right? So Chief Justice Breyer, you can tell he's really interested in the case. Justice Breyer. Justice Breyer has, if he's really interested in the case, you can tell because he will inevitably ask some ridiculously long and complicated hypothetical question that absolutely no one, including the advocates and the other justices, understands. But you can tell he's engaged. Justice Scalia, it's really easy to tell if he's irritated at the advocate or not just by the tone of voice. And even the more difficult to predict justices, like Justice Kennedy and Chief Justice Roberts, have their own little quirks and tics that you can familiarize yourself with over time. And one of the new faculty members at Chicago-Kent is Professor Dan Katz, formerly of Michigan State. He's one of the guys who's worked at Fantasy SCOTUS and has worked with Josh Blackman and some other researchers across the country to build automated methods for predicting outcomes in Supreme Court cases. And he's going to start using, in his model, incorporating some oral argument information. Both the transcript and the audio signal itself can be used to predict argument outcomes. You can even look at things like how loud a justice is speaking at a time, how many questions he or she asks, how irritated or does he mispronounce the justice's name. There's all kinds of things you can do with this data.
Good luck trying to predict Thomas by his audio. So, shifting scales, as I mentioned before in your little teaser. This is a recent project that Oyez put together. It was inspired by the project Snowfall, if anyone's familiar with that. It's from the New York Times. Yes. And they put together this fantastic multimedia storytelling project, essentially, that explains what happened in this very terrible avalanche. And it's got tons of text, it's got videos, it's got audio, it's got pictures, it's got maps, and you can pretty much just use it however interests you the most. So, inspired by that, and inspired by the feedback we got from teachers, we put together Shifting Scales. Now the teachers were telling us that our deep dives, which focused on one case at a time, was excellent, but they tend to teach a topic rather than a specific case. So while it would be nice to learn more about same-sex marriage, like in terms of Windsor versus the US, which was the big deciding one 2 years ago, maybe they want to hear more about same-sex marriage or same-sex couple issues in the Supreme Court. So we put together Shifting Scales, and this focuses on how the Roberts Court is interpreting the Fourth Amendment, as you can tell. It's also, since it's inspired by Snowfall, it's got pretty much any kind of interactive media that you would like to use for it. It's separated into chapters, which I will show you once I get it to work. We've got the introduction, investigation, arrest, post-arrest, post-conviction, so whichever strikes your fancy. For example, in post-arrest, it starts with the story of one of these cases. March 3rd, 2005, this is where it's loading. Albert and April Florence were driving with their 4-year-old son along Interstate 295 in New Jersey. And now you see that New Jersey here is highlighted. What does that mean? Well, that will take you right to our DNA collection laws by state, interactive map. And if you want to look at the entire map, you can highlight it by state. You can see what the DNA collection laws are in each state. And you can just see them by a certain requirement, like have DNA collection laws but require a warrant or other judicial action. That kind of thing. Now you can go right back to the story. We've also got the highlight of his case, or his case is highlighted, apologies. You click on that, it takes you to more information about his case. It also shows you the full timeline of all Fourth Amendment cases that the Supreme Court has been looking into. You can click on other ones, see how they are. We've also got pictures, we've got quotes, because we are, Oyez, we've got lots of quotes from our audio. We also, since we are at a law school, we have lots of access to experts. So this is a video of one of our expert professors explaining the case, giving his perspective, which you can watch, you can read the text, you can skip, however is easiest for you to understand. This is very helpful for teachers and students in terms of being able to understand this concept. Whatever is easiest for you to learn, we're happy to provide it.
So Shifting Scales was sort of our first real foray into long-form storytelling-based media tools around the US Supreme Court. I encourage you to read the whole thing. It was actually, I found it really an interesting project to work on. And it's really, the curve, or the narrative arc of this is really about how the further along you are in the criminal justice system, the fewer and narrower your rights get, which might seem like something that's obvious, but not necessarily really when you talk to students and teachers who don't understand anything about criminal justice. So it's, like I said, our first foray into the kind of storytelling realm. We're interested in doing more of these projects, so I'd love to hear any ideas you have or anything like that. If you want to talk later about areas we could explore around storytelling in the Supreme Court. Okay, this is kind of a fun feature we call dancing justices. I'll show you an early glimpse. So if you want to switch the tab, whatever loads.
Come on, baby. Okay.
So this is from Oyez's new beta site. You can go to beta.oye.org and check it out now. It is still buggy, so I make no promises about it. But you can see the new design. This will come out sort of later on this year, sometime after the court's current term. But one of the features we kind of highlighted on it is the ability to look at the justice's votes in an individual case sorted by seniority or ideology, and if you switch between them, you can make them dance.
Shoot.
So we have this little animated thing that rotates them around.
We find this really fun.
Yeah, it's just fun on a long day. The justices flip around like that.
And on old Oyez, we're still working on a way to do this in new Oyez because we're trying to make it touchscreen sensitive. But if on old Oyez, if you hover over each justice, it'll tell you more specifics on how they voted. So Anthony Kennedy, for example, wrote the opinion of the court, voted with the majority, and then we have Roberts writing the minority opinion and joined Justice Scalia's opinion in part. So you can get a little more detail. And if anyone has ideas on how to do that for a touchscreen device for new Oyez, let us know. Searching the audio. If you are interested in finding a certain phrase, if you're curious how many times Justice Scalia said the words argle margle, it will be once, but you can search for it, it's possible. It's very easy to do. On new Oyez, it will be even easier. But for example, this is Alanis versus United States. This was a case from this current term that was just recently decided about a man who decided to post rap lyrics that could be interpreted as threatening on his Facebook page. Got him into a lot of trouble. Then it turned into a question about the definition of a threat, all kinds of things like that. But the true gem of this oral argument is the fact that Chief Justice Roberts references Eminem, which you can search for. See, it comes up twice. Come on. My computer's tired.
So they say
Because Eminem said it instead of somebody else?
because
And even better, if you scroll up just a little bit, you get to hear Chief Justice Roberts quote Eminem.
This is how a Chief Justice raps.
What about the language at pages 54 to 55 of the petitioner's brief? You know, Adam, make a nice bed for mommy at the bottom of the lake, tie a rope around her rock. This is during the context of a domestic dispute between a husband and wife. There goes mama splashing in the water, no more fighting with dad, you know, all that stuff. Now, under your test, could that be prosecuted?
no.
So that is Chief Justice Vanilla right there.
Yeah, the thing I love about that is you can hear him clearing his throat right before he starts reading these lyrics, going, am I really going to say this? Okay, so in addition to the oral argument collection, as you probably noticed, on Oyez we have fairly detailed and non-lawyer friendly case summaries for every case, and recently at least every case before the Supreme Court. We have not done those kinds of abstracts for every case ever at the Supreme Court because we're not completely crazy. Those case summaries are written by our research assistants at Chicago Kent. And we kind of try to highlight the cases that we think are important, mostly common law cases going back historically, and then, like I said, anything recent. But on Oyez, both on old Oyez and our new beta site, you have the ability to submit site feedback and say, this case is really important to me, this is why I think this case is important, and request that we write an abstract, or even write your own abstract that you can contribute to the Oyez archive. So all you do is submit a site feedback, there's a drop-down, you select abstract, and you can submit that to us, and we might even invite you to write your own summary of the case. Because I'm not a lawyer, Allie's not a lawyer, our founder, Professor Goldman, is not a lawyer, he's a political scientist. So it's difficult for us to tell sometimes which historical cases are really important. We do our best, but if a case is really important to you, we welcome you to point it out to us and we'll get on getting the case summary.
And we won't necessarily make you write it. It's okay.
Well, yeah, right.
Our research assistants, if they're free, if things work out, maybe we can have it to you within a week. Give or take. This one is my favorite, and clearly the most important. Is there anything cuter than the friendship between Justices Scalia and Ginsburg? Yes, there is, and it's the fact that there's a picture of them on an elephant. This and many more gems are available on the Supreme Court tour on oyez.org, which I don't believe I have pulled up, but it's very easy to access on old Oyez, current Oyez. You just click on tour. It will load eventually, I promise. And yeah, Wi-Fi is not like my computer anymore today. But it's really interesting. You can go through all public areas that the Supreme Court allows access to. Obviously the front right here. You can go into the Great Hall, the courtroom itself. You can pick which version you want to do. It's going to be even bigger and prettier in the new website. But you've got, of course, all the access to the public areas. We also give you access to a handful of justice chambers, including Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Kennedy, and Stevens. And there's a lot of very cute little personal items that we, highlight, like the picture of them riding the elephant. So, as you can tell, here's the courtroom. You can, move around. Oh, we can move around. We've even got some videos explaining the nice friezes at the tops of the courts and, showing what they are. So you can actually virtually tour the Supreme Court if you're not physically in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And if you try to get into Justice Ginsburg's chambers while you're in D.C., you'll probably be hunted down by U.S. Marshals before you get there. So this is really the only opportunity that I know of that you can actually see inside the justices' chambers, and it's really fascinating. Each of the justices has their own personality. Justice Kennedy's chamber is very neat and tidy, sort of very ornate. He's got this gorgeous artwork on his walls and this maroon-colored carpeting with gold stars all over it. Versus Justice Ginsburg's chambers, which is frankly littered with tchotchke. Including pictures of her and Justice Scalia on their various adventures. So in sort of a dark corner of Oyez, you can actually access things that we digitized for FOIA requests. The justices' personal financial statements, so you can see exactly where Justice Kennedy was speaking, where he got speaking funds, where his investments are. It was actually interesting for a while, looking at the justices' finances. Justice Sotomayor, when she first joined the court, was the only member of the court who had actually had a negative net worth. She had a lot of debt. That's not true anymore since her book came out. But it's just kind of interesting, and I think it's important to understand what the justices' financial dealings are.
Sure. And very easy to receive financial disclosure reports. You just click on any one and eventually you'll know. Okay, we talk really fast, so this little computer is helping balance out the length of this presentation.
That crash? Oh, never mind. Okay.
What have you done?
I just click on it.
You Chromecasted.
Okay.
Okay. No. Okay. We're good, I swear. Case locations. We are incorporating latitude, longitude, addresses so you can have access to seeing where these cases took place. For example, this was a recent case, Sheehan versus San Francisco, or San Francisco versus Sheehan. Either way, as you can tell, it took place in San Francisco. Some of them are more interesting, and you will find, for example, down here, United States versus Wong. Ms. Wong was stuck at the Inverness jail. So you can see exactly where the Inverness jail is located. Turns out, Portland. You can zoom in, you can just, it's Google Maps. Fun to play with, and just a nifty little feature that we're happy to have.
Yeah, so we sort of imagine different ways we could use this data down the road. I would love to see a feature built into one of our apps where you're walking on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, past where the phone booth in the wiretap phone booth in some famous Supreme Court case that I can't remember.
From the 70s.
Yes, or you're walking past this jail for some reason, and you get a little alert on your phone that says some famous Supreme Court case happened here. Okay, so new with our new pictures now loaded.
I swear there's a picture here. Let's use our imaginations.
Okay, I'll pull it up. So with Oyez in beta, we've actually incorporated built-in an API So this looks really ugly, and that's kind of the point. Right? If you're not a developer, you can kind of tune out for this one. But if you are more technical, you're a developer, you want to do something with our data, this looks gorgeous, because this is fully structured JSON coming out of our API. So it's really easy. Computers have a really easy time reading this kind of data. So our new API, it was completely open to the public. You can take and incorporate it to your own sites, your own apps, your own whatever. It's still kind of a work in progress, but like I said, delivers full JSON, well structured, lots of different querying options. And we're kind of excited to see what people do with this. We'd like to see people start doing some of the research projects, incorporating it into their own projects and their own apps, making it sort of available to the world for people to use outside of Oyez. So that's, again, available to the Oyez site.
Okay. You can also share the arguments and the clips themselves on Facebook and Twitter. It's very easy to make a clip on Oyez. You just kind of click on what you want, hit clip and share. It's very intuitive from there. Even more so on new Oyez, when you can clearly see that little share button and the little Facebook and Twitter logos, and just making a clip. For example, going back to the last, because you've listened to this and you've said, "My God, this amazing presentation I just saw, I love that Chief Justice Roberts rap." So you just click on it, hit clip and share, you highlight what's important to you, you've got a handy little link and you can share directly to Facebook or Twitter. You just click right on the button, hope your computer doesn't crash, and it,
So if you want to tell the whole world how cool you think it is that Chief Justice Roberts recited Eminem lyrics, you can do that.
You're welcome.
From sort of the same interface, you can actually take the Oyez player and embed it into your own websites. So this is something the Washington Post has done quite a bit. And you can take even just individual segments from oral arguments and embed them into your own website. So we really encourage journalists to try to pick up and use this. In the new version of Oyez, like I said, that's coming out later this summer, we're integrating with a tool called SoundSight that was developed by the Knight Lab at Northwestern University McGill School of Law. That actually provides a really cool way to embed audio segments into text documents, including journalism articles, where it actually transforms the text itself into just a link. You click on that link and you hear in the background, without interrupting the interface or interrupting the flow of the page that you're on, the audio of that clip. So making this even easier on the new site, but it's available now on the old site.
You can even see it in action. Here's the article. Oh, I swear the article's here. With audio. So yeah, they have all the pieces loaded. Very easy to scroll through and listen to the little bits that they're pulling out that are the most important. Very handy if you're not a nerd and sit through and listen to the whole 2.5 arguments like we did. You can also find out how Ted Cruz did in his oral arguments, because yes, Ted Cruz has argued before the Supreme Court several times. We actually are the only place you can find a list of all of the advocates online. So we make it as easy as humanly possible to do this. Basically, all you really have to do is search for a name if you know the person's name right away. For example, Ted Cruz. Let's go down a little to advocates. Look at that, Ted Cruz. You can click right on his name. We've got a picture of that. And you can see a handy list of all of the cases that he's argued. And then when going from the opposite direction, if you're just on a case and you want to see who argued it, we've got a list of the advocates right here. We've got their name, the link to their page that will also be like Ted Cruz's with a different picture. And we'll show you who they argued for the petitioner, respondent, or United States or state. The government as, oh, I can't pronounce it. Amicus. Let's go with that.
Yeah, so I mean, we are, as I mentioned, I think the only place we really have a more or less complete collection of all the advocates who are before the Supreme Court. Again, since 1955 when we started doing these recordings. That advocate data is kind of messy. That's one of our open projects right now, is to try to clean that up. We pull it out of transcripts and machines trying to find names, and a big body of transcripts can be really complicated. But we do have a complete, more or less complete collection of advocates. So in addition to the oral argument, we are, I think, the only place anywhere outside of the National Archives, where you can listen to the justices' opinion announcements that they read from the bench when an opinion comes down. These, I think, are really kind of fascinating. Unfortunately, the court's current policy is not to make these available to anyone, including the National Archives, until the start of the subsequent term. So all those really important Supreme Court cases that are being decided this month, these opinion announcements for those cases will not be available until sometime in October. That's the Supreme Court policy. That's not ours. I would make them available same day if I could. But so it goes. But these, I think, are really an interesting treasure trove and another opportunity to explore the personalities of these people. For example, one of my favorite opinion announcements was actually a dissent from the bench, where Justice Kennedy is dissenting in the first Affordable Care Act case, where Chief Justice Roberts sort of famously switched sides to uphold the ACA. And Justice Kennedy, from the bench, announced his dissenting opinion. And you can tell, we'll play a little of this audio, how really upset he is about this just by the rapidity of his tone of voice and the way he's saying some of the phrases. Can we play a little bit of it?
The statute requires a defined class of individuals to purchase health insurance. This mandate is first defended by the government as an exercise of Congress's power under the Commerce Clause. It is true that if an individual does not purchase insurance, he or she affects the insurance market to a degree. But the government's theory would make one's mere existence the basis for federal regulation. There would be no structural limit on the power of Congress. As a result, the government's theory would change the relation between the citizen and the federal government in a fundamental way. We cannot accept the government's theory. There are structural limits upon Congress's powers.
So if you listen to some of the intonations, the individual's mere existence, the basis for government regulation. There are structural limits. What's your best Justice Kennedy? Yeah, I think it's kind of fun and I think informative to listen to these, and especially the dissents from the bench, because there's often, especially in these really hot cases in the term, so much emotion that really comes out in these opinion announcements that you rarely see from the Supreme Court. So I think it's kind of fascinating.
And number 14, you can subscribe to Oyez podcast of oral arguments. If you're on the go, you're on the train, and you say, by God, I wish I could have listened to but last week's oral arguments. You don't have access to the full Oyez player, you don't want to spend that much time trying to zoom in and see the text. We do offer it as a podcast. It's by term itself, so if you subscribe to the 2014 term arguments, you will no longer have a podcast that updates, but once the 2015 term starts, we will obviously have a new podcast for you to subscribe to. These are, very easy to use, and as was requested very recently, for those of you who don't have Apple products, we also have a Stitcher page. If you go to Stitcher.com, you can have an account there, and you can listen to it as well. It's very easy. Even if you have an iPhone, you can, just have the Stitcher app and listen to it through there. It's downloaded on your phone, so you're not using data to try and stream it, and it's helpful if you're on the go and just really miss hearing the dulcet tones of Justice Breyer.
So those were our 14 points, and we went through those really fast.
We talk really fast.
A few other things, I thought we could talk a little bit about some of the things we had in the pipeline with Oyez. So I mentioned we're working with Professor Katz to incorporate oral arguments into his predictive modeling, trying to predict the outcomes of Supreme Court cases before they're actually decided. I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of that. Because there's so much political science research at this point that clearly demonstrates that you can, that the justices are really hinting at their votes during oral arguments. Or at least most of the justices are hinting at their votes during oral arguments. And if you can try to detect those with machines in a systematic way, I think it can make for a really powerful voting prediction tool. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. And I mentioned, and as you kind of demonstrated, we have new, completely redesigned Oyez site coming out later this year, sometime later this summer after the term ends. We spent a long, long time with this design, so I'm really interested to hear people's feedback. I don't think I mentioned this in my opening, but Oyez is really not for lawyers, right? Lawyers use Oyez, but it's not who we're focused on. We're focused on the Supreme Court because we think the public should be focused on the Supreme Court. because a majority of Americans can't name one of the 9 justices, let alone all of them, can't name one Supreme Court case in a given term. And they only really tune in 1 week out of the year when the hot cases are coming down. We want to encourage the public's interest in the Supreme Court, and we do that by trying to present a really nice, clean website that has a lot of information, rich information about the court and its cases. So like I said, we spent a lot of money and a lot of time crafting, I think, a really polished, high-quality design for the new site. So we're really proud of that. That's something I hope you'll check out once it comes out. In addition to that, we have received a grant from the Knight Foundation to expand beyond the U.S. Supreme Court. So however obscure and opaque the U.S. Supreme Court is, imagine how opaque the Texas Supreme Court is, or the Illinois Supreme Court, or any given state Supreme Court, right? Which is kind of curious because in most states we elect these judges and justices who serve on our state Supreme Courts. And most people, including me, and it's kind of my job not to do this, but I do it anyway, vote for those judges based on whose name sounds good. Right? We don't really know a lot about these judges. You know, maybe if you're a really really committed voter, you go and look up the ADA ratings for the judges. But beyond that, I don't know of anyone. I've never met someone who does a lot of research into this before they cast their vote for a state Supreme Court judge, and that's unfortunate because a lot of important stuff happens at state Supreme Courts. I live in Chicago. In Illinois, we have a massive pension crisis, right? And the state legislature last year finally reached a deal to solve the pension crisis by rolling back some of the benefits for state employees. And Illinois has a really strong clause in the state constitution that says the government has to be committed to making good on its pension offers to state employees. And you apply that language. The state Supreme Court of Illinois said that that law that the state legislature finally agreed to solve the state's pension crisis didn't agree with the state constitution. It was unconstitutional and threw it out. So now Illinois has a pension crisis all over again. That's a really important decision that the Illinois State Supreme Court made, and the coverage of that decision by and large is terrible because journalists don't have a lot of resources to cover local government, state governments anymore. Journalism has been turned on its head in the last decade, and state and local coverage has really suffered because of that, and state Supreme Courts almost never have a journalist covering them. That's almost not a beat anymore. So we want to make coverage of state Supreme Courts easier for journalists, and we want to encourage the public's interest in those important institutions. So we want to do essentially what we've done for the U.S. Supreme Court at the state level. And our first state is Texas. We'll be rolling that out later this year. We got amazing cooperation from the staff at the Supreme Court of Texas and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals to the 2 Supreme Courts in Texas, the 2 high courts in Texas. They're actually feeding us their data, and we're going to add to that our metadata, case summaries, everything you see on OE will be available for Texas, and that site is going to go live later this year. So we're excited about that. We have a couple of other states in line. Texas was the only state to really cooperate with us.
We've also got a great partnership with the Texas Tribune, which is a new, more state locally focused paper, or
online journalism.
Online journalism. Sorry, not paper. And they've got their writers that are writing case summaries for us, so it's much more interesting than just a lawyer sitting at a computer and trying to explain the case to you. And we're using that same Oyez storytelling focus to bring in the public into these specific cases as well.
And like I said, Texas was the only state to really cooperate with us on this, so we're going to take a different approach for some other states and hopefully get more staff at the state Supreme Courts on board to cooperate with us, so we can roll out more of these sites for other courts. We'll see how that goes. But Texas will be coming out later this year. We've also implemented some really interesting technology behind the scenes. So Oyez, as you saw in the Oyez player, right, we have, in addition to the audio, an aligned transcript that works against the audio, so which makes the audio searchable. Which I think is really important. As Allie mentioned, if you don't want to listen to a whole 2.5 hours of arguments about same-sex marriage and you're just looking for one segment that you heard about on the news or something like that, you have to be able to search that. The only way you can do that is you've got a transcript with time codes in it that aligns with the audio. In the past, our research assistants added those time codes to the transcripts. It was a really laborious process because we pay research assistants to sit there and essentially hit a space bar every time they heard the end of a sentence, which added a time code to the transcript. We've now, working with the University of Pennsylvania, used some really interesting signal processing software to force align transcripts, which is basically just automating that whole process. So that was really exciting for us. We should be able to churn out transcripts much faster. So now, like in the gay marriage cases, which were argued at the end of the term this year, the audio was posted, and half an hour later, we had the audio on Oyez with a transcript synchronized to it. So this technology is really amazing for us. In the past, it was a 5-hour turnaround time. Now it's half an hour.
Something else we're trying to do recently is we want to be seen as more current source of news rather than just as an archive. Recently, we partnered with Bloomberg BNA, specifically Kimberly Robinson, who is fantastic on Twitter. And if you're ever curious about Supreme Court things, I highly recommend giving her a follow. So on decision days, we've actually turned the Oyez homepage into a Twitter list of Oyez, Kimberly Robinson, and a handful of professors from Chicago Kent, including Christopher Schmidt of iSCOTUS, Jerry Goldman, our founder, and Shel Nahmad of Chicago Kent. I've been creating a storify for each time we do it, and it's become really interesting. Kimberly is at the court. She gets the opinions. She parses them, tweets them instantly. I don't know how she does it. It's incredible to see. And we're tweeting background. We've got all the audio Oyez. We've got all of the Oyez audio available to search and tweet and use as we need. Our professors are providing commentary. We're encouraging you to ask questions. So every decision day, starting at 8:15 Central Time, right? 9:15 Eastern Time. I have such a hard time with this. 9:15 Eastern Time, 45 minutes before the court releases opinions, we'll be tweeting background what we think might be coming out, things you might know, answering questions. The moment that they start announcing opinions, we're tweeting about that too. So if you tune into oyez.org on those days, you'll find them all. This was this morning as well. I like this in particular. And then, this too. Kimberly Robinson, live tweeting SCOTUS, shut up and take my money. It's free, it's okay. We tell you all the facts, what's been going on, once the opinions were actually coming down. Oh, the thing isn't loading. But it's separated by, the storify is separated by case. So for example, we got Ohio versus Clark, here's Kimberly's fantastic coverage, here's what the case was, here's what it's about. Oh my gosh, it's moving around.
Yeah, so this is all stuff we did like this morning.
Yeah.
While you were at breakfast, we were sitting in a corner being totally antisocial, live tweeting the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court kept us really busy because I think there were 6 decisions.
6 decisions this morning.
None of the ones anyone's interested in, probably, but
there were rumors that we were going to get Obamacare today, but we did not. Let me see. I'm sorry. Let me get to ones. So, for example, you're going to get a call from your wife. No. This was the big one. The big case is decided today. Walker versus Sons of Confederate Veterans about license plates in Texas. Kimberly had all of her fantastic coverage. We had, we'd already pulled out, listened to the Texas laying out their arguments, so you could just click right on that and hear what the government was trying to say and why the SCOTUS justices decided in their favor. Our professors were providing commentary. Chris Schmidt was reading through the opinions already and tweeting interesting things from the opinions. So we were giving you up-to-the-minute coverage as fast as we possibly can.
So with that, that's sort of what we've been doing in the last year, since the last time we were at CALIcon. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. We've got some Oyez pens up front. You're welcome to.
Did you say it was the Texas Tribune that was working with you?
Yes, the Texas Tribune. Which, if anyone is not familiar with the Texas Tribune, they are a fantastic journalism source for all things Texas, which is really one of the few good examples of high-quality local journalism to come out in the last 10 years since journalism's been in such upheaval.
It was interesting reading some about the Waco shootout from their perspective because they have a lot of really good legal resources as well. So they were talking about some of the, like a week or two later, what was happening to the people involved. A lot of them were still in jail. They couldn't afford bail. Why was the bail so high? And it's like, the rest of the world was down, but obviously in Texas, it's still a big issue.
Just because it was a $1 million bail for every individual arrested, regardless of whether they had any weapons or were found. With no hearing, by the way.
Yes?
So you're supported by grant money, but you made a comment if you subscribe to the podcast. So is there a service that you can?
No, that's free. That's just the term of
you're
art
just totally
used in
free
podcasts. Yeah. Everything we have is completely 100% free. That's our personal commitment to do this all for free.
Except you do get paid.
Yeah, I don't.
That's what the grant's for.
Any other questions or anything? Like I said, we have pens. So.
And you do have puppy videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah. So if anyone is a fan of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, last year he did a great segment on the Supreme Court in which, because there's no video in the court, he played our audio against videos of puppies. And a different puppy for every justice. So he encouraged. So he encouraged people to make their own versions of these videos. So we took the first Obamacare case and synced it up with puppies.
And he provided a lot of coverage, so you could get different expressions from the
Yes.
dogs and everything.
That's not us.
It's not. We're not the whole.
Taking off
If anyone actually has other questions while I'm trying to search, because clearly this will take some time, please feel free.
Are you going to do kittens next?
If they would, we would.
If they can
If someone can find 9 kittens and a spare Supreme Court bench, we'll do it.
And you can get the kittens to pose.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Just on a personal note, we were excited about, we got to talk to some of the people at Last Week Tonight recently because we're big fans of them, they like us. It all worked out, and so we were able to provide some background and coverage. So you know that Last Week Tonight is really good.
We will continue argument this morning in case 11-398, the Department of Health and Human Services versus Florida. General Willie.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. The Affordable Care Act.
We have 4.5 minutes of this.
Fundamental.
A lot of people have gone through and actually done the entire, case.
This is an issue of market manipulation, and that's how Congress looked at this.
I don't know what amused me more, the fact that it exists or the fact that I recognized the Kennedy dog before they identified it.
Any other questions?
Who's the duck?
The duck is just a random secretary. Yeah, they
on the other end there was a duck.
Yeah, the duck is like one of the secretaries from
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
The chicken is the stenographer, of course. I feel like I already say that.
They went to great lengths to try to match the justices with the dogs. So I don't know if we have a Scalia, but it's kind of perfect.
I'm sure we can find. Well, there's Alito. That's
Oh, that should be good.
Oh, okay.
Right there. So on the left is Justice Ginsburg, naturally.
Where are her glasses? She's got tiny glasses that are really cute.
She's kept taking them off.
And on the far left there is Justice Scalia.
There's the close-up.
Yeah. Spitting in the
Actually, truly, right? Anyway.
That'll be it, folks. Any other real questions? Okay, well, thank you.